13 and chapter 14 lectures together, but I kind of fell asleep at the end of chapter 13, so I decided to stop. You might have noticed a couple places where I kind of messed up. Anyway, I'll try to stay awake during this one. I don't know why I was so tired doing the last one. So let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 14, Stress, Lifestyle, and Health. As you may or may not know, I spent 30 years in working in medicine. So this is a chapter that is close to my heart. Let's go ahead and get started. The term stress, as it relates to the human condition, first emerged in scientific literature in the 1930s, but it did not enter the popular vernacular until the 1970s. Today, we often use the term loosely in describing a variety of unpleasant feeling states. For example, we often say we are stressed out when we feel frustrated, angry, conflicted, overwhelmed, or fatigued. Despite the widespread use of the term, stress is a fairly vague concept, which is difficult to define with precision. Researchers have had a difficult time agreeing on an acceptable definition of stress. Some have conceptualized stress as a demanding or threatening event or situation, for example, a high-stress job, overcrowding, and long commutes to work. Such conceptualizations are known as stimulus-based definitions because they characterize stress as a stimulus that causes certain reactions. Stimulus-based definitions of stress are problematic, however, because they fail to recognize that people differ in how they view and react to challenging life events and situations. Others have conceptualized stress in ways that emphasize the physiological responses that occur when faced with demanding or threatening situations, such as increased arousal. These conceptualizations are referred to as response-based definitions because they describe the stress as a response to environmental conditions. Endocrinologist Hans Selye once defined stress as the response of the body to any demand, whether it is caused by or results in pleasant or unpleasant condition. And this is Dr. Selye right here. A useful way to conceptualize stress is to view it as a process whereby an individual perceives in response to events that they appraise as overwhelming or threatening to their well-being. A critical element of this definition is that it emphasizes the importance of how we appraise, that is, judge demanding or threatening events, often referred to as stressors. These appraisals, in turn, influence our reactions to such events. A primary appraisal involves judgment about the degree of potential harm or threat to well-being that a stressor might entail. A stressor would likely be appraised as a threat if one anticipates that it could lead to some kind of harm, loss, or other negative consequence. Conversely, a stressor would likely be appraised as a challenge if one believes that it carries the potential for gain or personal growth. The perception of a threat triggers a secondary appraisal. Judgment of the options available to cope with a stressor, as well as perceptions of how effective such options will be. A threat tends to be viewed as less catastrophic if one believes something can be done about it. To be sure, some stressors are inherently more stressful than others, in that they are more threatening and leave less potential for variation in cognitive appraisals, for example, objective threats to one's health or safety. Nevertheless, appraisal will still play a role in augmenting or diminishing our reactions to such events. If a person appraises an event as harmful and believes that the demands imposed by the event exceed the available resources to manage or adapt to it, the person will subjectively experience a state of stress. If one does not appraise the same event as harmful or threatening, they are unlikely to experience stress. According to this definition, environmental events trigger stress reactions by the way that they are interpreted and meanings that they are assigned. Stress is largely in the eye of the beholder. It's not so much what happens to you as it is how you respond. And that's according to Sale-Yi in 1976. Stress can sometimes be a positive motivating force that can improve the quality of your life. This kind of stress, which Sale-Yi called eustress, from the Greek eu, meaning good, is a good kind of stress associated with positive feelings, optimal health, and performance. A moderate amount of stress can be beneficial in challenging situations. Research shows that moderate stress can enhance both immediate and delayed recall of educational material. Increasing one's level of stress will cause performance to change in a predictable way. As stress increases, so do performance and general well-being, eustress. When stress levels reach an optimal level, the highest point of the curve, performance reaches its peak. A person at this stress level is colloquially at the top of his game, meaning he feels fully energized, focused, and can work with minimal effort and maximum efficiency. When stress exceeds this optimal level, it is no longer a positive force. It becomes excessive and debilitating, or what Sale-Yi termed distress, from the Latin dis, which means bad. People who reach this level of stress feel burned out. They are fatigued, exhausted, and their performance begins to decline. If the stress remains excessive, health may begin to erode as well. Stress is everywhere, and it has been on the rise over the last several years. Each of us is acquainted with stress. Some are more familiar than others. In many ways, stress feels like a load you just can't carry. Stress is an experience that evokes a variety of responses, including those that are psychological. For example, physiological, accelerated heart rate, headaches, or gastrointestinal problems. Cognitive, such as difficulty concentrating or making decisions, and behavioral, such as drinking alcohol, smoking, or taking actions directed at eliminating the cause of the stress. Although stress can be positive at times, it can have deleterious health implications, contributing to the onset of progression of a variety of physical illnesses and diseases. The scientific study of how stress and other psychological factors impact health falls within the realm of health psychology, a subfield of psychology devoted to understanding the importance of psychological influences on health, illness, and how people respond when they become ill. Health psychology emerged as a discipline in the 1970s, a time during which there was increasing awareness of the role behavioral and lifestyle factors play in the development of illness and disease. Health psychologists, and actually this came out of a concept called mind-body integration. Before that, doctors controlled the body, psychologists controlled the mind, but in the 1970s, they came up with the concept of this body-mind integration, where the mind controls the body and the body can control the mind. Before that, the two disciplines were completely separated, and you couldn't, never the twain shall meet. But with health psychology, the twain actually did meet, and this came out of body-mind integration. And I was part of that. I was on the cutting edge of that. Not like I started anything, but I was working both in psychology and in medicine when this whole thing took place. Health psychologists investigate issues such as why people make certain lifestyle choices, for example, smoking or eating unhealthy food, despite knowing the potential adverse health implications of such behaviors. Health psychologists also design and investigate the effectiveness of interventions aimed at changing unhealthy behaviors. One of the more fundamental tasks of health psychologists is to identify which groups of people are especially at risk for negative health outcomes based on psychological or behavioral factors. Psychologist Walter Cadden in 1932 proposed the fight or flight response, which occurs when a person experiences very strong emotions, especially those associated with a perceived threat. During the fight or flight response, the body is rapidly aroused by activation of both the sympathetic and nervous system and the endocrine system. This arousal helps prepare the person to either fight or flee from a perceived threat. And of course, in this situation, this individual fought. According to Cannon, the fight or flight response is a built-in mechanism that assists in maintaining homeostasis, an internal environment in which physiological variables such as blood pressure, respiration, digestion, and temperature are stabilized at levels optimal for survival. Thus, Cannon viewed the fight or flight response as adaptive because it enables people to adjust internally and externally to threats in their environment, allowing them to continue to be alive and overcome the threat. Wow, here you go. I don't think they've touched each other. Salye discovered the general adaptation syndrome, the body's nonspecific physiological response to stress. The general adaptation syndrome consists of 3 stages. Number 1, the alarm reaction. Number 2, the stage of resistance. And number 3, the stage of exhaustion. Alarm reaction describes the body's immediate reaction upon facing a threatening situation or emergency, and it is roughly analogous to the fight or flight response described by Cannon. During an alarm reaction, you are alerted to a stressor, and your body alarms you with a cascade of physiological reactions that provide you with the energy to manage the situation. And that's what's happening with our minion. If exposure to a stressor is prolonged, the organism will enter the stage of resistance. During this stage, the initial shock of alarm reaction has worn off and the body has adapted to the stressor. Nevertheless, the body also remains on alert and is prepared to respond as it did during the alarm reaction, although with less intensity. If exposure to a stressor continues over a longer period of time, the stage of exhaustion ensues. At this stage, the person is no longer able to adapt to the stressor. The body's ability to resist becomes depleted as physical wear takes its toll on the body's tissues and organs. As a result, illness, disease, and other permanent damage to the body, even death, may occur. Salye's general adaptation syndrome suggests that stressors tax the body via a 3-phase process: an initial jolt, subsequent readjustment, and a later depletion of all physical resources that ultimately lays the groundwork for serious health problems and even death. It should be pointed out that this model is a response-based conceptualization of stress, focusing exclusively on the body's physical responses while largely ignoring psychological factors such as appraisal and interpretation of threats. Salye's model has had an enormous impact on the field of stress because it offers a general explanation for how stress can lead to physical damage and disease. Prolonged or repeated stress has been implicated in development of a number of disorders such as hypertension and coronary artery disease. The physiological mechanisms of stress are extremely complex, but they generally involve the work of 2 systems: the sympathetic nervous system and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When a person first perceives something as stressful, Salye's alarm reaction, the sympathetic nervous system triggers arousal via the release of adrenaline from the adrenal glands. And there's your adrenal glands right here on top of your kidneys. Hormones activates the fight or flight response to stress, such as accelerated heart rate and respiration. The HPA axis, which is primarily endocrine in nature, becomes especially active, although it works much more slowly than the sympathetic nervous system. In response to stress, the hypothalamus, one of the limbic structures in the brain, releases corticotropin-releasing factor, a hormone that causes the pituitary gland to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. And as we can see, the hypothalamus is the red and yellow structure, I guess that's red, is the red structure, and the pituitary gland is the blue structure. And the hypothalamus releases corticotropin-releasing hormone, which activates the pituitary gland to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, also known as ACTH. The ACTH then activates the adrenal glands to secrete a number of hormones into the bloodstream, and an important one is cortisol, which can affect virtually every organ within the body. Cortisol is commonly known as a stress hormone and helps provide that boost of energy when we first encounter a stressor, preparing us to run away or fight. Sustained elevated levels of cortisol weaken the immune system, and this is a problem with excessive stress, is a weakened immune system. In short bursts, this process can have some favorable effects, such as providing extra energy, improving immune system functioning temporarily, and decreasing pain sensitivity. Extended release of cortisol with prolonged or chronic stress often comes at a high price. High levels of cortisol have been shown to produce a number of harmful effects, significantly weaken the immune system, while high levels are frequently observed among depressed individuals. When stress is extreme or chronic, it can have profoundly negative consequences. Stress often contributes to the development of certain psychological disorders, including post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, and other serious psychiatric conditions. Stress is linked to the development and progression of a variety of physical illnesses and diseases. Researchers in one study found that people injured during the September 11, 2001 World Trade Center disaster, or who developed post-traumatic stress symptoms, afterward later suffered significantly elevated rates of heart disease. Self-reported stress symptoms among aging and retired Finnish food industry workers were associated with morbidity 11 years later. This study also predicted the onset of musculoskeletal, nervous system, and endocrine and metabolic disorders. Another study reported that male South Korean manufacturing employees who reported high levels of work-related stress were more likely to catch the common cold over the next several months than were those employees who reported lower work-related stress levels. Now, this is really important. This is really important because what we're seeing here is studies that have told you that whatever you do today is going to affect you 11 years in the future. It's going to affect you later. So just going, I think today I'll start being good and start eating healthy and stop smoking and stop drinking alcohol and shooting up with heroin. I think I'll just quit today and everything will be perfect for the rest of my life. That's just not the way it works. Whatever you do to yourself today, whether it has to do with drugs, alcohol, tobacco, or fatty foods, eating potato chips for supper over a 3-week period, this is going to affect you years down the road. There's no way that you can correct the mistakes you make in the past. Those are mistakes that have been made, and they're going to affect your body for the rest of your life. This is a sad thing to think about, but it's true. It's the way things work, and this is one of the reasons why I exercise every day, why I've been exercising for the last 60 years. And the reason is because I knew this back in the 1960s and 1970s. I found this out in the 1960s and 1970s. And looking at the people that I was educated with, the people in my high school, we've had our 50-year reunion, the people in my college, half of them are gone. Half of them are gone because they didn't figure this out back in the 1960s and 1970s. And now they're not there anymore. And I still am, and I'm still teaching. It's just the way it works. You can't. You create a debt when you do things that you shouldn't be doing. You've created a debt, and the pay is going to come when you turn, as you get older. You're going to pay that debt. It always happens. There's no way around it, and I apologize, but that's the ugly truth. It's the same way. It's the same way with global warming. We can pretend, oh, well, I'm not. I'm not. I have to make my money now, and so I have to pollute the environment. Well, you know what's going to happen. You were saying that 15 years ago, and you really screwed things up, and you put all those hydrocarbons into the atmosphere, and now we've got 100 and what did I read? Phoenix had 19 straight days of 111 degrees, of over 111 degrees. What? you know? Okay, so uh, it's a debt we have to pay, and it's a debt we will pay. We have no choice. So this is just something. I mean, this is just proof that the people of the past, um, turning a blind eye to what they were doing. I'm sorry, it's going to come back and bite you in the butt eventually. For an individual to experience stress, they must first encounter a potential stressor. In general, stressors can be placed into one of two broad categories, chronic and acute. Chronic stressors include events that persist over an extended period of time, such as caring for a parent with dementia, long-term unemployment, or imprisonment. Acute stressors involve brief focal events that sometimes continue to be experienced as overwhelming well after the event has ended, such as falling on an icy sidewalk and breaking your leg. Whether chronic or acute, potential stressors come in many shapes and sizes. They can include major traumatic events, significant life changes, daily hassles, as well as other situations in which a person is regularly exposed to threat, challenge, or danger. Some stressors involve traumatic events or situations in which a person is exposed to actual or threatened death or serious injury. Stressors in this category include exposure to military combat, threatened or actual physical assaults, for example, physical attacks, sexual assaults, robbery, childhood abuse, terrorist attacks, natural disasters, for example, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and automobile accidents. And I have been through most of these things: military combat, um, physical attacks, robbery, terrorist attacks. Been through earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes, as well as tornadoes. I can put tornadoes in there. Automobile accidents. Yeah, I've been in one. I've been in a couple of those as well. Men, non-whites, and individuals in lower socioeconomic status uh, groups report experiencing a greater number of traumatic events than do women, whites, and individuals in higher socioeconomic status groups. So men are the targets, and it's mainly because we put ourselves in bad situations. Some individuals who were exposed to stressors of extreme magnitude develop post-traumatic stress disorder, a chronic stress reaction characterized by experiences and behaviors that may include intrusive and painful memories of the stressor event, jumpiness, persistent negative emotional states, detachment from others, angry outbursts, and avoidance of reminders of the events. And I just had one of these the other day. My stress had to do with airplane crashes because I was in the Air Force, and one of the things that I had to do was I was the person that was given the task of recovering the body. Actually, I didn't have to recover it; I had to take possession of it. We were the morgue, so it was really kind of interesting because there's a certain smell that human remains have, and when when I arrived at Saley, I experienced that same smell, that same, well, and I won't go into why and where it came from, but experienced that same smell. And there were other individuals who were suffering from PTSD, from combat-related PTSD, and we discussed this, and eventually we came to the conclusion that that I was suffering from PTSD. Now, the interesting thing is we're having these. forest, these fires in Canada, and the smoke is coming down. And the other day, um, we were driving to the opera in Des Moines, and I had another PTSD episode due to all the smoke because I had experienced that kind of smoke before in a combat situation. Anyway, there you go. So I had PTSD as well. Most stressors that we encounter are not nearly as intense as those already mentioned. Many potential stressors we face involve events or situations that require us to make changes in our ongoing lives and require time as we adjust to those changes. Examples include death of a close family member, marriage, divorce, and moving. In the 1960s, psychiatrists Thomas Holmes and Richard Rahe examined the link between life stressors and physical illness based on the hypothesis that life events requiring significant changes in a person's normal life routines are stressful, whether these events are desirable or undesirable. They developed the Social Readjustment Rating Scale, consisting of 43 life events that require varying degrees of personal readjustment. Many life events that most people would consider pleasant, holidays, retirement, marriage, are among those listed on the SRRS. These are examples of eustress. Holmes and Rahe also proposed that life events can add up over time, and that experiencing a cluster of stressful events increases one's risk of developing physical illnesses. In developing their scale, Holmes and Rahe identified 48 events they referred to as life change units. Death of a spouse ranked highest on the scale with 100 LCUs, and divorce ranked second highest with 73 LCUs. In addition, personal injury or illness, marriage, and job termination also ranked highly on the scale with 53, 50, and 47 LCUs, respectively. Change in residence, 20 LCUs, change in eating habits, 15 LCUs, and vacation, 13 LCUs, ranked low on the scale. Minor violations of law rank the lowest with 11 LCUs. LCUs for each checked item are totaled for a score quantifying the amount of life change. Agreement on the amount of adjustment required by the various life events on the SRRS is highly consistent, even cross-culturally. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that I've been divorced twice. I've been divorced twice, and I've been married twice, 3 times actually. What else do I have high on? We move a lot. We change residence a lot because we were in the military. So about every second or third year, I'd change. Not only change residences, but change jobs. We'd have to move across the country, or sometimes out of the country. Anyway, not important. So I've experienced lots of life stress. Research has demonstrated that accumulating a high number of life change units within a brief period of time, 1 or 2 years, is related to a wide range of physical illnesses, even accidents and athletic injuries, and mental health problems. In an early demonstration, researchers obtained LCU scores for U.S. and Norwegian Navy personnel who were about to embark on a 6-month voyage. A later examination of medical records revealed positive but small correlations between LCU scores prior to the voyage and subsequent illness symptoms during the ensuing 6-month journey. People tend to experience more physical symptoms such as backache, upset stomach, diarrhea, and acne on specific days in which self-reported LCU values are considerably higher than normal, such as the day of a family member's wedding. And here are the LCUs. There you go. The Social Readjustment Rating Scale provides researchers a sample, easy-to-administer way of assessing the amount of stress in people's lives, and it has been used in hundreds of studies. Despite its widespread use, the scale has been subject to criticism. Many of the items on the SRRS are vague. Some have challenged its assumption that undesirable life events are no more stressful than desirable ones. the SRRS, remains one of the most well-known instruments in the study of stress, and it is a useful tool for identifying potential stress-related health outcomes. Potential stressors do not always involve major life events. Daily hassles, the minor irritations and annoyances that are part of our everyday lives, for example, rush hour traffic, lost keys, obnoxious coworkers, inclement weather, arguments with friends or family, can build on one another and leave us just as stressed as life change events. Researchers have demonstrated that the frequency of daily hassles is actually a better predictor of both physical and psychological health than our life change units. In a well-known study of San Francisco residents, the frequency of daily hassles was found to be more strongly associated with physical health problems than were life change events. Daily minor hassles, especially interpersonal conflicts, often lead to negative and distressed mood states. Cyber hassles that occur on social media may represent a modern and evolving source of stress. In one investigation, social media stress was tied to a loss of sleep in adolescence, presumably because ruminating about social media caused a physiological stress response that increased arousal. Clearly, daily hassles can add up and take a toll on us, both emotionally and physically. Stressors can include situations in which one is frequently exposed to challenging and unpleasant events, such as difficult, demanding, or unsafe working conditions. Although most jobs and occupations can at times be demanding, some are clearly more stressful than others. Most would agree that jobs containing various unpleasant elements, such as those requiring exposure to loud noise, heavy equipment operator, constant harassment and threats of physical violence, prison guard, perpetual frustration, bus driver in a major city, or those mandating that an employee work alternating day and night shifts, hotel desk clerk, are much more demanding and thus more stressful than those that do not contain such elements. Occupations with heavy workload, uncertainty, and lack of control create a great deal of stress. Chronic occupational stress contributes to job strain, a work situation that combines excessive job demands and workload with little discretion in decision making or job control. Many occupations involve at least a moderate amount of job strain, in that they often involve heavy workloads and little job control. For example, inability to decide when to take breaks. Such jobs are often low status and include those of factory workers, postal clerks, supermarket cashiers, taxi drivers, and short order cooks. Job strain can have adverse consequences on both physical and mental health. It has been shown to be associated with increased risk of hypertension, heart attacks, recurrence of heart disease after a first heart attack, significant weight loss or gain, and major depressive disorder. A longitudinal study of over 10,000 British civil servants reported that workers under 50 years old who earlier had reported high job strain were 68% more likely to later develop heart disease than were those workers under 50 years old who reported little job strain. Some people who are exposed to chronically stressful work conditions can experience job burnout, which is a general sense of emotional exhaustion and cynicism in relation to one's job. Job burnout occurs frequently among those in human service jobs, for example, social workers, teachers, therapists, and police officers. Wait a minute. Oh no, that's me. I've never been a police officer. Job burnout consists of three dimensions. The first dimension is exhaustion, a sense that one's emotional resources are drained, or that one is at the end of their rope and has nothing more to give at a psychological level. Second, job burnout is characterized by depersonalization, a sense of emotional detachment between the worker and the recipients of his services, often resulting in callous, cynical, or indifferent attitudes toward these individuals. Third, job burnout is characterized by diminished personal accomplishment, which is the tendency to evaluate one's work negatively. Job strain appears to be one of the greatest risk factors leading to job burnout, which is most commonly observed in workers who are older, ages 55 to 64. Whew, I'm 73, so I'm beyond that. Unmarried and whose jobs involve manual labor. Well, I don't. I am married and I only do manual labor as exercise. Heavy alcohol consumption, physical inactivity, being overweight, and having a physical or lifetime mental disorder are also associated with job burnout. I have none of those. So there you go. I haven't had a drink since 1976. In addition, depression often co-occurs with job burnout. One large-scale study of over 3,000 Finnish employees reported that half of the participants with severe job burnout had some form of depressive disorder. Job burnout is often precipitated by feelings of having invested considerable energy, effort, and time into one's work while receiving little in return. For example, little respect or support from others or low pay. Our close relationship with friends and family, particularly the negative aspects of these relationships, can be a potent source of stress. Negative aspects of close relationships can include conflicts such as disagreements or arguments, lack of emotional support or confiding, and lack of reciprocity. All of these can be overwhelming, threatening to the relationship, and thus stressful. Such stressors can take a toll both emotionally and physically. A longitudinal investigation of over 9,000 British civil servants found that those who at one point had reported the highest level of negative interactions in their closest relationships were 34% more likely to experience serious heart problems, fatal or non-fatal heart attacks, over a 13 to 15-year period compared to those who experienced the lowest levels of negative interaction. Health is affected when physiological reactions are sustained, as can happen in response to ongoing stress. If the reactions that compose the stress response are chronic, or if they frequently exceed normal ranges, they can lead to cumulative wear and tear on the body, in much the same way that running your air conditioner on full blast all summer will eventually cause wear and tear on the air conditioner. The high blood pressure that a person under considerable job strain experiences might eventually take a toll on their heart and set the stage for a heart attack or heart failure. Someone exposed to high levels of the stress hormone cortisol might become vulnerable to infection or disease because of weakened immune system functioning. Physical disorders or diseases whose symptoms are brought about or worsened by stress and emotional factors are called psychophysiological disorders. The physical symptoms of psychophysiological disorders are real and can be produced or exacerbated by psychological factors, hence the psycho and the physiological and psychophysiological. And these are some of the psychophysiological disorders: cardiovascular disease, gastrointestinal problems, respiratory problems, musculoskeletal problems, skin eruptions, hypertension. Oh, these are the examples. Okay. There you go. Friedman and Booth Cooley in 1987 statistically reviewed 101 studies to examine the link between personality and illness. They proposed the existence of disease-prone personality characteristics, including depression, anger, hostility, and anxiety. A study of over 61,000 Norwegians identified depression as a risk factor for all major disease-related causes of death. In addition, neuroticism, a personality trait that reflects how anxious, moody, and sad one is, has been identified as a risk factor for chronic health problems and mortality. The immune system is the body's surveillance system. It consists of a variety of structures, cells, and mechanisms that serve to protect the body from invading microorganisms that can harm or damage the body's tissues and organs. When the immune system is working as it should, it keeps us healthy and disease-free by eliminating harmful bacteria, viruses, and other foreign substances that have entered the body. Sometimes the immune system will function erroneously. Sometimes it can go awry by mistaking your body's own healthy cells for invaders and repeatedly attacking them. When this happens, the person is said to have an autoimmune disease, which can affect almost any part of the body. How an autoimmune disease affects a person depends on what part of the body is targeted. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease. Asthma is an autoimmune disease. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. Eczema and psoriasis, autoimmune. Rheumatoid arthritis. Systemic lupus erythematosus. Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Thyroiditis. Okay. There you go. There's some of your autoimmune diseases. But there's more. We're not done. Rheumatoid arthritis, an autoimmune disease that affects the joints, results in joint pain, stiffness, and loss of function. And that's what it looks like. Systemic lupus erythematosus, an autoimmune disease that affects the skin, can result in rashes and swelling of the skin. And there's a reason why there's a female here, and the reason is because this lupus is far more common in females than it is in males. This is Raynaud's phenomenon is where your red blood cells stack up, and it causes circulation problems. So you have chronically cold fingers, as weird as that is. Graves' disease, an autoimmune disease that affects the thyroid gland, can result in fatigue, weight gain, and muscle aches. And once again, it's far more common. As a matter of fact, almost all the autoimmune diseases are more common in females than they are in males. One of the reasons may be that females live longer than males. In the United States, I think, women live on an average 4 years longer than men do. And the other reason has to do with the reproductive system and whatnot. The immune system may sometimes break down and be unable to do its job. This situation is referred to as immunosuppression, the decreased effectiveness of the immune system. When people experience immunosuppression, they become susceptible to any number of infections, illnesses, and diseases. Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or AIDS, is a serious and lethal disease that is caused by human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, which greatly weakens the immune system by infecting and destroying antibody-producing cells, thus rendering an untreated person vulnerable to any of the number of opportunistic infections. And I just learned that my cat has feline immunodeficiency virus, and he's probably had it for a long time. He was a stray, and we picked him up. He probably had it before we picked him up. Actually, he came to our house. We live in the middle of a cornfield, so we have a lot of stray animals that come and live in our barn and whatnot. Anyway, he has FIV, which is feline immunodeficiency virus. Once upon a time, this was in the 80s, I ruptured my spleen and I had to get 6 units of blood. This was in the middle 80s, and in the middle 80s, they didn't know how to screen for HIV. They couldn't screen blood samples for HIV, and I got 6 units. So there for a while, the doctors were not really sure whether I had potentially picked up HIV from any of the 6 units of blood. But that was 40 years ago, so I guess I'm okay. Either that or I fought off the virus, which is a possibility. Even though I lost my spleen, I had a ruptured spleen and they had to excise it. So I'm spleenless and I don't have HIV. So there you go. The question of whether stress and negative emotional states can influence immune function has captivated researchers for over 3 decades, and discoveries made over that time have dramatically changed the face of health psychology. Psychoneuroimmunology is the field that studies how psychological factors such as stress influence the immune system and immune functioning. The term psychoneuroimmunology was first coined in 1981 when it appeared as a title of a book that reviewed available evidence for associations between the brain, the endocrine system, and the immune system. And I actually read that book when it first came out in 1981. I've been studying medicine and psychology for since the middle 70s. To a large extent, this field evolved from the discovery that there is a connection between the central nervous system and the immune system. And this was part of the body-mind integration health psychology movement that happened in medicine and psychology. Ader and Cohen in 1975 paired flavored water, the conditioned stimulus, with the presentation of an immunosuppressive drug, the unconditioned stimulus, causing sickness, an unconditioned response. Not surprisingly, rats exposed to this pairing developed a conditioned aversion to the flavored water. However, the taste of the water itself later produced an immunosuppression, a conditioned response, indicating that the immune system itself had been conditioned. Studies show that the effects of brief and chronic stressors on the immune system, public speaking, medical school examinations, unemployment, marital discord, divorce, death of spouse, burnout and job strain, caring for a relative with Alzheimer's disease, exposure to the harsh climate of Antarctica. It has been repeatedly demonstrated that many kinds of stressors are associated with poor or weakened immune functioning. And this has happened to me several times. One time I had to admit that I was on an FBI, not want list, but a wish list. I was one of, Richard Nixon came up with a blacklist of students that had irritated him while he was president of the United States. And there were like 10,000 names on it. My name was one of them on there. And I had to disclose this to a group of military people. And that was very stressful. I caught a cold. I could barely talk. Really interesting. The one that wasn't interesting was the fact that I got fired from a job that I thought I would have for the rest of my life. Got fired from the job. The stress from that job, from losing that job, caused me to have a heart attack. That was 10 years ago. No, that was longer. That was 13 years ago. So I'm okay. Don't worry, I'm still alive. Anyway, so I had a heart attack 13 years ago. And that probably had to do with the stress of being fired. I'd never been fired before. It was a job, like I said, that I thought I would keep for the rest of my life, and it didn't happen. As important as to remember that there is a tangible physiological connection between the brain and the immune system. The sympathetic nervous system innervates immune organs such as the thymus, the bone marrow, the spleen, which I don't have, and even lymph nodes. Stress hormones released during hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis activation can adversely impact immune function by inhibiting the production of lymphocytes, white blood cells that circulate in the body fluids that are important in the immune response. And these are the red cells, these whatever color you want to call that. And these purple cells are the white cells, and they are what fight off all these white cells in this picture are lymphocytes, and lymphocytes fight off viruses. So these are all lymphocytes. The cardiovascular system is composed, and there are other types of white cells that fight bacteria, that fight heavy metals. We have all of these in our system. We have a different type of white cell that fights off allergens. So if you have allergies, then you probably have an excess number of what we call eosinophils. Now, it's a really strange name. Eosin is an orange stain. Is an orange stain, and that's where it got its name. But these white cells pick up the orange stain, and for that reason, they call them eosinophils, and they are the ones that fight off allergies and if you pick up a parasite, they fight off parasites as well, as weird as that may sound. And this is the job I had when I was working in the laboratory. For 30 years, I did these things, looked at people's immune systems and to see how strong they were, or whether they were fighting bacteria or viruses. I can tell from looking at a blood smear, just like I'm looking at this blood smear, I can see that this individual has a viral infection because they have so many lymphocytes. And that's what the body does. The body increases the number of the type of white cell that will fight the whatever infection that you're dealing with. If it's a bacterial infection, you have neutrophils. If you have an allergy, you have eosinophils. If you have a viral infection like this, then you have lymphocytes. And if you think about it, and of course I have, if you think about it, most of the diseases that are out there are viral diseases. Measles, mumps, chickenpox, HIV, coronavirus. All your colds are all viruses. So the lymphocytes are really, really important to keep you alive. The cardiovascular system is composed of the heart and blood circulation system. For many years, cardiovascular disorders have been a major focal point in the study of psychophysiological disorders because of the cardiovascular system's centrality in the stress response. Heart disease is one such condition. Each year, heart disease causes approximately 1 in 3 deaths in the United States, and it is the leading cause of death in the developed world. And this is what a damaged heart looks like. Actually, that is a dead patch of heart tissue. Now, can this person survive with necrotic tissue in his heart? And the answer is yes. I've got a dead patch in my heart. It's not very large. The whole back of my dad's heart was dead, was necrotic tissue, but it still functioned. I mean, the heart still functioned. He lived to be 90 years old. He had his heart attack when he was in his 70s. So yeah, you can live with a damaged heart with necrotic tissue. Some people, they have a heart attack and they just die. They don't survive it. Other people, like my dad and me, he had several problems with his heart, but he was lucid right up to the end. It's not like a stroke where you lose some of your functioning. He didn't lose any function at all, and he died at age 90. I think, yeah, he died in 2008. He was born in 1918, so yeah, he was 90 years old. The symptoms of heart disease vary somewhat depending on the specific kind of heart disease one has, but they generally involve angina. Angina just means chest pain, and that's what's happening to Omar Sharif in this. This is Dr. Zhivago, where he has a massive heart attack. So, yeah, there you go. That's his angina. Chest pains are discomfort that occur when the heart does not receive enough blood. The pain often feels like the chest is being pressed or squeezed. Burning sensations in the chest and shortness of breath are also commonly reported. Such pain and discomfort can spread to the arms, neck, jaws, stomach as nausea, and back. And when I had my heart attack, my pain was right under my clavicle, on my left side. And of course, I had seen tons and tons of heart attacks, and I didn't pick it up. I felt like I had indigestion, is what it was. It was really kind of interesting, if you find heart attacks interesting. Anyway, yeah, it was right under my clavicle. That's where the pain was. I had 93% occlusion, but they fixed everything. My heart attack didn't have anything to do with fat, didn't have anything. It had to do with exercise, actually, strangely enough. Okay. Blood flow. A major risk factor for heart disease is hypertension, which is high blood pressure. Hypertension forces a person's heart to pump harder, thus putting more physical strain on the heart. Now, my heart was used to physical strain because I lift weights, and that's actually what my problem was. Because I'd been fired, and because I was momentarily depressed, uh, the pressure in my heart went down. It decreased, and since it decreased. Some of my blood vessels were larger or were more extended because of, because I lift weights. And because of that, one of them folded over. And like I said, I had 93% occlusion. They were able to go in and clean it and open it up again. It was just a kind of a momentary situation. Um, as soon as they opened it back up, I had no problems after that. Only a tiny part of the back of my heart, I have about a dime-sized patch of necrotic tissue. Other than that, everything's fine. I haven't had any problems since. And like I said, that was 13 years ago. Hypertension forces a person's heart to pump harder, and thus putting more physical strain on the heart. If left unchecked, hypertension can lead to a heart attack, stroke, or heart failure. It can also lead to kidney failure and blindness. Hypertension is a serious cardiovascular disorder and is sometimes called the silent killer because it has no symptoms. One who has high blood pressure may not even be aware of it. And of course, I do have high blood pressure, and I do take medication to lower my blood pressure. Many risk factors contributing to cardiovascular disorder have been identified. These risk factors include social determinants such as aging, income, education, employment status, and there you go, employment status. That's what got me. I got fired. Behavioral risk factors include unhealthy diet, tobacco use, physical inactivity, excessive alcohol consumption, obesity, and diabetes. Unhealthy diet, tobacco use, physical inactivity. And of course, the reason I am still alive is because I don't have any of these problems. I had a friend, I had known him for years. He had exactly the same heart attack in exactly the same place I did. He only had 90% occlusion. In other words, he had 10% flow, and he died from his heart attack because he had several of these risk factors: obesity, excessive alcohol consumption. He smoked like a chimney, and that's what killed him. And unhealthy diet. Exposure to stressors of many kinds has also been linked to cardiovascular problems, natural disasters, marital conflict, exposure to high traffic noise levels at one's home. Perceived discrimination appears to be associated with hypertension among African Americans, especially African American males. Now you have to ask yourself, why African American males and not African American females? And it's because society accepts African American females more readily than it does African American males. If you look at the number of African American females in Congress and the number of African American males in Congress, many more African American females than there are African American males. People who are prone to heart disease tend to think, feel, and act differently than those who are not. These individuals tend to be intensively driven workaholics who are preoccupied with deadlines and always seem to be in a rush. These individuals exhibit type A behavior patterns. Those who are more relaxed and laid back were characterized as type B. In a sample of type A's and type B's, it was discovered that heart disease was over 7 times more frequent among the type A's than type B's. And luckily, I'm a type B. And my friend, of course, was a type A. And he's dead. And I'm still alive. And he was younger than me. Major component of type A pattern include an aggressive and chronic struggle to achieve more and more in less and less time. Specific characteristics of the type A pattern include an excessive competitive drive, chronic sense of time urgency, impatience, and hostility towards others, particularly those who get in the person's way. Extensive research clearly suggests that the anger-hostility dimension of type A behavior pattern may be one of the most important factors in the development of heart disease. Haynes et al. In 1980 studies showed that suppressed hostility was found to substantially elevate the risk of heart disease for both men and women. Research showed that individuals who respond with high levels of anger in a stressful situation were over 6 times more likely than those who indicated less anger to have had a heart attack by age 55, and they were 3.5 times more likely to have experienced heart disease by the same age. From a health standpoint, it clearly does not pay to be an angry person. Shida and Steptoe in 2009 concluded that evidence suggests that anger and hostility constitute serious long-term risk factors for adverse cardiovascular outcomes among both healthy individuals and those already suffering from heart disease. One reason angry and hostile moods might contribute to cardiovascular disease is that such moods can create social strain, mainly in the form of antagonistic social encounters with others. This strain could then lay the foundation for disease-promoting cardiovascular responses among hostile individuals. In this transactional model, hostility and social strain form a cycle. I think she's angry at somebody. A number of other negative emotional states have been linked with heart disease, including negative affectivity and depression. Negative affectivity is a tendency to experience distressed emotional states involving anger, contempt, disgust, guilt, fear, and nervousness. It has been linked with the development of both hypertension and heart disease. By the early 1990s, evidence showed that depressed individuals who were followed for long periods of time were at increased risk for heart disease and cardiac death. In one investigation of over 700 Denmark residents, those with the highest depression scores were 71% more likely to have experienced a heart attack than were those with lower depression scores. Now, I just told you that I got fired, and I got really depressed because I got fired, and that may have been why I had the heart attack. Low blood pressure. It is now clear that a relationship exists between patients with heart disease and patients with depression. Patients with heart disease have more depression than the general population, and people with depression are more likely to eventually develop heart disease and experience higher mortality than those who do not have depression. The more severe the depression, the higher the risk. In one study, death rates from cardiovascular problems was substantially higher in depressed people. Depressed men were 50% more likely to have died from cardiovascular problems, and depressed women were 70% more likely. And this is according to Osby et al. In 2001. A statistical review of 10 longitudinal studies involving initially healthy individuals revealed that those with elevated depressive symptoms have, on average, a 64% greater risk of developing heart disease than do those with fewer symptoms. And I'm guessing she has fewer symptoms. This is according to Wilson and Singal in 2003. Okay. I think she's okay. Okay. A study of over 63,000 registered nurses found that those with more depressed symptoms when the study began were 49% more likely to experience fatal heart disease over a 12-year period, and that's according to Wang et al. In 2009. Asthma is a chronic and serious disease in which the airways of the respiratory system become obstructed, leading to great difficulty in expelling air from the lungs. The airway obstruction is caused by inflammation of the airway, leading to thickening of the airway walls, and a tightening of the muscles around them, resulting in a narrowing of the airway. Because airways become obstructed, a person with asthma will sometimes have great difficulty breathing and will experience repeated episodes of wheezing, chest tightness, shortness of breath, and coughing, the latter occurring mostly during the morning and the night. Around 4,000 people die each year from asthma-related causes, and asthma is a contributing factor to another 7,000 deaths each year. The CDC has revealed that asthma affects 18.7 million U.S. adults and is more common among people with lower education and income levels. Especially concerning is that asthma is on the rise, with rates of asthma increasing 157% between 2000 and 2010. Asthma attacks are acute episodes in which an asthma sufferer experiences the full range of symptoms. Asthma exacerbation is often triggered by environmental factors such as air pollution and allergens, for example, pollen, mold, and pet hairs, cigarette smoke, airway infections, cold air, or a sudden change in temperature and exercise. People with asthma tend to report and display a high level of negative emotions, such as anxiety, and asthma attacks have been linked to periods of high emotionality. High levels of emotional distress during both laboratory tasks and daily life have been found to negatively affect airway function and can produce asthma-like symptoms in people with asthma. In one investigation, 20 adults with asthma wore pre-programmed wristwatches that signaled them to breathe into a portable device that measures airway function. Results showed that higher levels of negative emotions and stress were associated with increased airway obstruction and self-reported asthma symptoms. A longitudinal study of 145 children found that parenting difficulties during the first year of life increased the chances that the child developed asthma by 107%. A cross-sectional study of over 10,000 Finnish college students found that high rates of parent or personal conflicts, for example, parental divorce, separation from spouse, or severe conflicts in other long-term relationships, increased the risk of asthma onset. A study of over 4,000 middle-aged men who were interviewed in the early 1990s and again a decade later found that breaking off an important life partnership, for example, divorce or breaking off a relationship from parents, increased the risk of developing asthma by 124% over the time of the study. A headache is a continuous pain anywhere in the head and neck region. Inflammation of the sinuses caused by an infection or allergic reaction can cause sinus headaches, which are experienced as pain in the cheeks and forehead. Migraine headaches are a type of headache thought to be caused by blood vessel swelling and increased blood flow. Migraines are characterized by severe pain on one or both sides of the head, an upset stomach, and disturbed vision. They are more frequently experienced by women than by men. Tension headaches are triggered by tightening, tensing of facial and neck muscles. They are the most commonly experienced kind of headache, accounting for about 42% of all headaches worldwide. In the United States, well over one-third of the population experiences tension headaches each year, and 2 to 3% of the population suffers from chronic tension headaches. And I have never had a headache. How about that? I must be the most relaxed person in the world. A number of factors can contribute to tension headaches, including sleep deprivation, skipping meals, eye strain, overexertion, muscle tension caused by poor posture, and stress. Stress has been demonstrated to increase sensitivity to pain. Tension headache sufferers compared to non-sufferers have a lower threshold for and greater sensitivity to pain, and they report greater levels of subjective stress when faced with a stressor. Stress may contribute to tension headaches by increasing pain sensitivity in already sensitive pain pathways in tension headache sufferers. And of course, this is Betty Boop with a headache. Lazarus and Folkman in 1984 distinguished two fundamental kinds of coping: problem-focused coping and emotion-focused coping. In problem-focused coping, one attempts to manage or alter the problem that is causing one to experience stress, for example, the stressor. Problem-focused coping strategies are similar to strategies used in everyday problem solving. They typically involve identifying the problem, considering possible solutions, weighing the costs and benefits of those solutions, and then selecting an alternate. Oh, good, it's coping. Emotion-focused coping consists of efforts to change or reduce the negative emotions that are associated with stress. These efforts may include avoiding, minimizing, or distancing oneself from the problem, or positive comparisons with others. I'm not as bad off as she is, or seeking something positive in a negative event. Now that I've been fired, I can sleep in for a few days. In some cases, emotion-focused coping strategies involve reappraisal, whereby the stressor is construed differently and somewhat self-deceptively without changing its objective level of threat. While many stressors elicit both kinds of coping strategies, problem-focused coping is, Problem-focused coping is more likely to occur when encountering stressors we perceive as controllable, while emotion-focused coping is more likely to predominate when faced with stressors that we believe we are powerless to change. Clearly, emotion-focused coping is more effective in dealing with uncontrollable stressors. Perceived control is our beliefs about our personal capacity to exert influence over and shape outcomes, and it has major implications for our health and happiness. Research has demonstrated that perceptions of personal control are associated with a variety of favorable outcomes, such as better physical and mental health and greater psychological well-being. Greater personal control is also associated with lower reactivity to stressors in daily life. The link between perceived control and health may provide an explanation for the frequently observed relationship between social class and health outcomes. Research has found that more affluent individuals experience better health partly because they tend to believe that they can personally control and manage their reactions to life stressors. Perhaps buoyed by the perceived level of control, individuals of higher social classes may be prone to overestimating the degree of influence they have over particular outcomes. The need to form and maintain strong, stable relationships with others is a powerful, pervasive, and fundamental human motive. Building strong interpersonal relationships with others helps us establish a network of close, caring individuals who can provide social support in times of distress, sorrow, and fear. Social support can be thought of as the soothing impact of friends, family, and acquaintances. Social support can take many forms, including advice, guidance, encouragement, acceptance, emotional comfort, and tangible assistance such as financial help. Other people can be very comforting to us when we are faced with a wide range of life stressors, and they can be extremely helpful in our efforts to manage these challenges. Social support appears to work by boosting the immune system, especially among people who are experiencing stress. In a study, spouses of cancer patients who reported high levels of social support showed indications of better immune functioning on 2 out of 3 immune functioning measures, compared to spouses who were below the median on supported social support. Studies of other populations have produced similar results, including those of spousal caregivers of dementia sufferers, medical students, elderly adults, and cancer patients. Beyond having a sense of control and establishing social support networks, there are numerous other means by which we can manage stress. A common technique people use to combat stress is exercise. It is well established that exercise, both of long, aerobic, and short anaerobic duration, is beneficial for both physical and mental health. There is considerable evidence that physically fit individuals are more resistant to the adverse effects of stress and recover more quickly from stress than less physically fit individuals. One reason exercise may be beneficial is because it might buffer some of the deleterious physiological mechanisms of stress. In high-stress humans, exercise has been shown to prevent telomere shortening, which may explain the common observation of a youthful appearance among those who exercise regularly.
Exercise in later adulthood appears to minimize the detrimental effects of stress on the hippocampus and memory. Among cancer survivors, exercise has been shown to reduce anxiety and depressive symptoms. Exercise is a highly effective tool for regulating stress. And if you want to look like this at age 52, exercise, exercise, exercise. Psychologists have suggested that happiness consists of three distinct elements: the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life. The pleasant life is realized through the attainment of day-to-day pleasures that add fun, joy, and excitement to our lives. The good life is achieved through identifying our unique skills and abilities and engaging these talents to enrich our lives. Those who achieve the good life often find themselves absorbed in their work or their recreational pursuits. The meaningful life involves a deep sense of fulfillment that comes from using our talents in the service of the greater good, in ways that benefit the lives of others or that make the world a better place. In general, the happiest people tend to be those who pursue the full life. They orient their pursuits toward all three elements. For practical purposes, a precise definition of happiness might incorporate each of these elements: an enduring state of mind consisting of joy, contentment, and other positive emotions, plus the sense that one's life has meaning and value. The definition implies that happiness is a long-term state, what is often characterized as subjective well-being, rather than merely a transient, positive mood we all experience from time to time. It is this enduring happiness that has captured the interests of psychologists and other social scientists. The average person in the world tends to be relatively happy and tends to indicate experiencing more positive feelings than negative feelings. And there may be a reason for this. Your brain really cannot function, cannot handle depression and negative feelings over an extended length of time. So happiness, and there's just tons of different ways that we cope with bad things. We can ignore negative things. We can pretend that it didn't happen. We can watch television and take our minds off of these negative things. We cope, and we have to. This is the way humans have survived for an extended length of time. They get over the bad stuff. They get over it. And that's one of the reasons why dealing with grief is so important. Grief is debilitating. It really is. When somebody dies, they're not there anymore. And of course, whatever it is that you experience that you need to experience that you can't experience anymore, you've got to replace that with something. And of course, that's one of the reasons why grief is dealt with the way it is. And if you take wait a minute, what is my class? Psych 240, the human development class. The last chapter deals with death and dealing with death. And you're going to find out that the way that my family has always dealt with death is to celebrate the person's life, not to rue the fact that they're not there anymore. And of course, the other thing about my family is that we live for a long time. We live into our 90s and hundreds. But I have a sister that died at 60. She died of cancer. Did we rue the fact that she was dead? Well, sure, we felt bad about it, but we celebrated the life that she had. And that's just the way that my family handles things. A lot of different people handle death in a different way. Grief is one of those things that you just got to deal with, and you got to get over it, and you got to move on, because, there's no way you can turn back the hands of time. That person's never going to come back. Both my parents have died. My mother was 98. My dad was 90 when they died. But we didn't feel bad about it. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox now. When asked to evaluate their current lives on a scale ranging from 0 to 10, with 0 representing the worst possible life and 10 representing the best possible life, people in more than 150 countries surveyed from 2010 to 2012 reported an average score of 5.2. People who live in North America, Australia, and New Zealand reported the highest average life at 7.1, whereas those living in sub-Saharan Africa reported the lowest average score of 4.6. Worldwide, the 5 happiest countries are Denmark, Norway, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Sweden. The United States is ranked 17th happiest. And if I were to rank my life, it would be a 9. And there's a reason why it's not a 10, but I won't go into that. So one reason why. I was thinking about this the other day. You know, I exercise twice a week. I go to the gym twice a week to lift weights. I walk every morning. And I was driving to the gym and I was thinking, and I'm driving my convertible. It's a nice warm day. I'm driving my convertible, the top's down. And I'm thinking, you know, life just doesn't get any better than this. And I don't I don't drink sugar in my pop anymore. And I was drinking. I was getting ready for the gym, so I was carbing up. So I drank a Code Red instead of a sugar-free, zero sugar Code Red. And I was thinking, it doesn't get any better than this. Anyway, okay. So the United States is 17th happiest country in the world, and there you go with happy rates. Oh, Canada's happier than we are. Okay. And we're happier. That's Germany right there. That's France. And that's England. There you go. The happiest countries in the world. Australia. I used to have a student from Australia. She was funny. Couldn't understand a word she said. Anyway. Ooh, look at that. Afghanistan, the least happiest place. Of course, Taliban just took over there. Family and other social relationships appear to be key factors correlated with happiness. Studies show that married people report being happier than those who are single, divorced, or widowed. Happy individuals also report that their marriages are fulfilling. Some have suggested that satisfaction with marriage and family life is strongest predictor of happiness. Is the strongest predictor of happiness. Happy people tend to have more friends, more high quality social relationships, and stronger social support networks than less happy people. Happy people also have a high frequency of contact with friends. A nation's per capita, and I have to tell you guys, I don't have a lot of friends. I hardly ever go anywhere. But I do have you guys, and I consider all of you my friends. So don't tell me I'm not, okay? Because obviously that's a real positive thing. Nation's per capita gross domestic product is associated with happiness levels. Changes in gross domestic product, which is a less certain index of household income, bear little relationships to changes in happiness. On the whole, residents of affluent countries tend to be happier than residents of poor countries. Within countries, wealthy individuals are happier than poor individuals, but the association is much weaker. To the extent that it leads to increases in purchasing power, increases in income are associated with increases in happiness. Income within societies appears to correlate with happiness only up to a point. In a study of over 450,000 U.S. residents, researchers found that well-being rises with annual income, but only up to $75,000. The average increase in reported well-being for people with incomes greater than $75,000 was null. As implausible as these findings might seem, higher incomes may impair people's ability to savor and enjoy the small pleasures of life. And this may be one of the reasons why you see these billionaires and they don't seem happy at all. We've got the lotto today is, or something. Anyway, something's $1 billion. Somebody's going to win $1 billion. They won't actually get $1 billion, so they get like $600 million. But does that make anybody happy? And it seems not to. It makes them more stressed. So I'll just stay where I am and be my happy self driving my convertible with the top down to the gym, drinking my Code Red, savoring my Code Red, because it's the only one I'll get. I'll get two more afterwards to replace the all the calories that I burned. And I have to do that otherwise. I have no energy at all. Anyway, not important. Happy people compared to those who are less happy are more likely to graduate from college and secure more meaningful and engaging jobs. And this is one of the things I told my kids. I tell my students whenever I think about it. You, you know, we're looking for things. We're looking for things that uh, you know, momentary happiness, that's what drinking does. Alcohol makes you momentarily happy. Marijuana makes you happy while you're smoking pot, but then afterwards you're not nearly as happy as you would have been if you hadn't smoked the pot, because well, there's a very real physiological reason why marijuana smokers are so bored when they're not stoned. But the one thing that I would tell you is happiness is the most important thing. That's what you need to seek, is happiness. So if somebody makes you happy, if you need to decide whether you're going to marry the rich person or the person that makes you happy, marry the person that makes you happy, not the rich person. It's and this was happening back in the 60s and 70s. Women were choosing people that they thought would be a better match for them, not the person that made them happy. And that is what got me involved with my first spouse. But my kids made me happy, and I got to keep the kids. So there you go. That's pretty good. That's not a bad situation. Anyway, so you need to find happiness. If your job makes you unhappy, find another job that makes you happy. Okay. If working at the store, at the grocery store, makes you happy, then do it rather than, find something that really bugs you. I've never worked a day in my life, mainly because I really like doing the work that I do. And I've worked in medicine. I was a high school teacher. That wasn't so much fun. And a junior high teacher. That wasn't fun at all. But I love teaching in college. Lots of different jobs, even the most manual labor. I just go into thinking, this is what I need to do, and this is what will make me happy. And so I get it done. But I was a farmer. I'm a farm kid, so you got to get the job done. Once they obtain a job, they are also more likely to succeed people that are happy. While education shows a positive but weak correlation with happiness, intelligence is not appreciably related to happiness. It doesn't have anything to do with intelligence, it has to do with accomplishment. The relationship between religiosity and happiness depends on societal circumstances. Nations and states with difficult living conditions, for example, widespread hunger and low life expectancy, tend to be more highly religious than societies with more favorable living conditions. Among those who live in nations with difficult living conditions, religiosity is associated with greater well being. In nations with more favorable living conditions, religious and non religious individuals report similar levels of well being. And this is really important. You may think that religion gives you happiness, but the reality is, if you are in a stable situation, religion's not going to make any difference to how you feel. Of course, if you believe in that stuff, you need to really go ahead and follow up on it. The living conditions of one's nation can influence factors related to happiness. To the extent that people possess characteristics that are highly valued by their culture, they tend to be happier. Self-esteem is a stronger predictor of life satisfaction in individualistic cultures than in collectivistic cultures, and extroverted people tend to be happier in extroverted cultures than in introverted cultures. Something similar to sensory adaptation often occurs when people experience emotional reactions to life events. In much the same way that our senses adapt to changes in stimulation, for example, our eyes adapting to bright light after walking out of the darkness of a movie theater into the bright afternoon sun, we eventually adapt to changing emotional circumstances in our lives. When an event that provokes positive or negative emotions occurs, at first we tend to experience its emotional impact at full intensity. We feel a burst of pleasure following such things as a marriage proposal, birth of a child, acceptance to law school, an inheritance, and the like. As you might imagine, lottery winners experience a surge of happiness after hitting the jackpot, but then it goes away. In some circumstances, happiness levels do not revert to their original positions after a joyous occasion. People generally tend to adapt to a marriage so that it no longer makes them happier or unhappier than before. They often do not fully adapt to unemployment or severe disabilities. In a study, German respondents did not get lasting emotional boosts from marriage. Instead, they reported brief increases in happiness followed by quick adaptation. Widows and those who had been laid off experienced sizable decreases in happiness that appeared to result in long-term changes in life satisfaction. Long-term happiness levels can and do change for some people. And these are Germans. You can tell they're all waving German flags. Recent findings about happiness provide an optimistic picture suggesting that real changes in happiness are possible. Thoughtfully developed well-being interventions designed to augment people's baseline levels of happiness may increase happiness in ways that are permanent and long-lasting. These changes in happiness may be targeted at individual, organizational, and societal levels. Researchers in one study found that a series of happiness interventions involving such exercises as writing down 3 good things that occurred each day led to increases in happiness that lasted over 6 months. Measuring happiness and well-being at the societal level over time may assist policymakers in determining if people are generally happy or miserable, as well as when and why they might feel the way they do. Studies show that the average national happiness scores over time and across countries relate strongly to 6 key variables: per capita gross domestic product, which GDP, which reflects a nation's economic standard of living, social support, freedom to make important life choices, healthy life expectancy, freedom from perceived corruption in government and business, and generosity. And of course, these are German soccer fans. They've got soccer shirts on. In 1998, Martin Seligman urged psychologists to focus more on understanding how to build human strength and psychological well-being. Seligman helped establish positive psychology. Positive psychology can be thought of as the science of happiness. It is an area of study that seeks to identify and promote those qualities that lead to greater fulfillment in our lives. This field looks at people's strengths and what helps individuals to lead happy, contented lives, and it moves away from focusing on people's pathology, faults, and problems. And the reality is, before 1998, before Seligman came up with his idea, before the APA endorsed Seligman in 2001, psychology was mostly identifying people's pathology, their problems, and dealing with those problems and their pathology. That was it. That was what psychology was all about. There was no positive psychology. There was no looking at happiness. There was no seeing things in a positive light. That was just not done. So the first 20 years of my studying, 30 years of studying psychology had to do with identifying negative things. And now, since positive psychology has, and of course I've always supported positive psychology. It just wasn't endorsed by everybody else. So positive psychology is my way of seeing the world now. Me and Seligman, there you go. Way to go, Martin. Some of the topics studied by positive psychologists include altruism and empathy, creativity, forgiveness, and compassion, the importance of positive emotions, enhancement of immune system functioning, savoring the fleeting moments of life, and strengthening virtues as a way to increase authentic happiness. Recent efforts in the field of positive psychology have focused on extending its principles toward peace and well-being at the level of the global community. And of course, my dissertation was on resilience in the American Indian population. That was my dissertation topic. And strangely, that's why I got fired. It's a long story, and it was a long time ago. But the ideas were different back then. Okay, qualities that help promote, and it was the Indian community. It was actually the leaders of the Indian community, the American Indian community. I don't want you to think that I was messing around with people from Delhi or something, or Calcutta. No, it was the leaders. They were looking for funding. They were seeking funding for drug abuse and alcohol abuse. And since I was trying to identify positive things, and they were trying to get funding for negative things, they didn't want me to do my research. As far as the population, they were very much in favor of my research. And my research, one of the reasons for my research was to combat suicides. If you can convince people that they have positive ideas or that the positive ideas work, then potentially they will think about it. As long as they can think about it, you can stop them from committing suicide. Qualities that help promote psychological well-being, for example, having meaning and purpose in life, a sense of autonomy, positive emotions, and satisfaction with life, are linked with a range of favorable health outcomes, especially improved cardiovascular health, mainly through their relationships with biological functions and health behaviors. The quality that has received attention is positive affect, which refers to pleasurable engagement with the environment such as happiness, joy, enthusiasm, alertness, and excitement. The characteristics of positive affect, as with negative affect, can be brief, long-lasting, or trait-like. Independent of age, gender, and income, positive affect is associated with greater social connectedness, emotional and practical support, adaptive coping efforts, and lower depression. It is also associated with longevity and favorable physiological functioning. Positive affect serves as a protective factor against heart disease. In a 10-year study of Nova Scotians, people from Canada, the rate of heart disease was 22% lower for each 1 point increase in the measure of positive affect. In terms of our health, the expression "don't worry, be happy" is helpful advice. There has also been much work suggesting that optimism, the general tendency to look on the bright side of things, is also a significant predictor of positive health outcomes. Whereas positive affect is mostly concerned with positive feeling states, optimism has been regarded as a generalized tendency to expect that good things will happen. Optimism has been conceptualized as a tendency to view life stressors and difficulties as temporary and external to oneself. Studies have consistently shown that optimism is linked to longevity, healthier behaviors, fewer post-surgical complications, better immune functioning among men with prostate cancer, and better treatment adherence. Optimistic people report fewer physical symptoms, less pain, better physical functioning, and are less likely to be rehospitalized following heart surgery. And that is finally the end of the chapter. I apologize for it being so long. You can imagine if I'd put the two together. Obviously, this time I didn't. Okay, let me admit something. I like the health psychology chapter a lot more than the IO psychology chapter. And that may be one of the reasons why the other one put me to sleep And this one I was energized through the whole thing. Anyway, okay, I'll talk to you next week. Next week's the last week. We'll tackle chapter 15 and 16, and I'm not exactly sure what they are. Psychological disorders and therapy and treatment. Okay, we'll tackle that next week.